white currently. It's very temperamental. Should I? Yeah, share that. Or the screen. Okay, there we go.
Okay, what? We just lose it again?
No.
Is that okay now? Okay. It is Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. The time is what? 6:43. And I hereby bring this meeting to order of the Nahant Board of Selectmen. Subject tonight is exclusively the Nahant Police and Fire Station feasibility study. And we will now turn it over to our consultants, Context Architecture.
I was just going to provide a little bit of background of how we got here.
Oh, yes, of course.
So before the architects start, I just wanted to talk about how we got here. So in October of 2024, the Select Board created the Public Safety Designer Selection Committee that was composed of Chief Antrim and Chief Furlong, who are also here today. Me as finance director at the time, fire union representative, Lieutenant Doyle, police union representative, is it Sergeant Leary?
It is now, yeah.
Okay. And two town administrator appointments, Carl Macario and Dave Walsh. The charge of the committee was to develop a request for qualifications to select a designer to complete a feasibility study for the replacement of the Nahant fire and police stations. Following acceptance of the feasibility study, the committee may be retained to select a designer for schematic or final design based on the recommendations of the feasibility study. So the committee started meeting in April of 2025, and it was led by Chief Antrim. And we met several times to draft the request for qualifications. The RFQ was issued on August 20th of 2025, and we had a short turnaround time for proposals to be due on September 5th. And required that all interested parties that were going to submit an RFQ come and attend a mandatory pre-proposal meeting and site visit on August 26th. The town received 5 responses. We deemed that 4 had met the minimum qualifications that we could review. So after the committee met and evaluated and ranked each proposal based on predetermined criteria, we selected Context Architecture. And so we have them here today. We've been working with them since October of 2025 to put together this feasibility study, and they're here to present what transpired since October and have this presentation for the board as well as for anybody who's tuned in on Zoom.
Excellent.
Great. My name is Jeff Shaw. I'm principal at Context Architecture. And with me is Sean Coveney, is the project manager who did most of the work on this project. Just a little bit about our firm. We specialize in public safety facilities. It's really one of the core aspects of our practice and have done numerous throughout the Boston area up into Maine and Rhode Island. And we also have done a number of projects coastal related. So we had a lot of experience working around areas that have issues with storm surge and other types of challenges. So the feasibility process is very well known to us. We do, over 100 feasibility studies leading to future projects. So we really understand some of the dynamics that are in play and the types of questions that have to be asked and tried to be answered during this process. So Sean's going to take you through the whole process that we did for this project. This is basically the conclusion of our work for this phase. And this presentation today will focus on some recommended solutions and things to think about for the town. And then we have a follow-up where we want to get into some of the costs associated with that. We thought uniquely we might break the costs out so that we can kind of talk about the needs, the results of the feasibility study, and some of the factors at play without cost necessarily looming over everything. It will loom over everything. But just to give us space to have that conversation, then we'll come back, have another conversation maybe where we really get into the costs of what's before us. So without further ado, Sean.
Good evening. Thanks for hosting us. Thanks for the introduction, Allison. As Jeff mentioned, I'm a project manager at Context Architecture, and I manage the project from October till now, doing the day-to-day work, both with the in-house team. We had Taylor who did a lot of the work with me on the project. And then we've managed the consultants. We had a decent team with the consultants, spanning structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection. One of the key consultants that we worked with was Buston O'Neill, who did the civil engineering for the work. So they helped with the existing conditions analysis, site selection, and ultimately the concept design. The goal for today is to walk through the four main tasks that we've gone through, which is that existing conditions analysis. So we looked at both the existing conditions of the police and fire station, as well as some other sites within town. We then concurrently looked at a space needs study. So that space needs looked at what the fire departments currently are operating with, what they need to look forward in the future to kind of manage a modern public safety for the town. In addition to that, we did a site selection. So basically what we did is we took the findings from that. We had a rough idea of the size and scale of those facilities, and looked at some lots in town. And then ultimately at the end of that, worked with the town to kind of select a few of those to move into a concept design. We then have 4 concept designs, 2 fire stations, a public safety building, and a police station. And right now what's being done is, as Jeff alluded to, cost estimating. So just want to focus on the 4 main tasks that we walked through. So starting with the existing conditions analysis, we're looking at the existing fire station at 67 Flash Road. Some high level issues and concerns with this station, not contending that you guys can't currently function and serve the community, but one of the big concerns is obviously the flooding of the community. So the station does currently reside within the floodplain. It's a concern, just has to be brought up. Working with Chief Antrim and Chief Furlong, there hasn't been any flooding at the station to date, but just worth noting that the station resides in that floodplain. On top of that, there are some concerns about zoning for this particular area. The building basically takes up most of the site. The lot itself, part of it actually resides within the natural resources district. So there are some concerns when it comes to zoning for future development of this particular lot. Something to worth noting. However, it is town owned and it's currently being operated as the fire station area. So I think residents would be familiar if it stayed there. Architecturally speaking, the station is tight. There's a lot of spaces that are combined. Basically you're walking right into kind of a public area that's also the day room, small kitchen, there's one bunk area, there's not a lot of storage. The apparatus bay is very tight. So there's some space concerns, there's no decontamination sequence. On top of that, from a code standpoint, the entrances aren't accessible. And if you were to basically do any substantial addition or remediation to the property, whether it be $100,000 or a third of the property, you'd have to basically take the entire building into accessibility code, which none of it really is. And then on top of that, from an MEP FB standpoint, there is a vehicle exhaust system, but it currently doesn't work.
Because the building's so tight, the hoses have been repeatedly torn off of the apparatus and damaged, so we just functionally
Were
can't use.
donated by another community.
No, that was through a grant, federal grant.
And then there is no sprinkler system. So a lot of concerns when you're considering not only the site and the existing building. Moving on to the existing police station. When working with Chief Furlong, basically understanding that this used to be an old school that was moved across the road, correct? And currently repurposed as the police station. It is very small, similar situation from the fire station. There's a lot of spaces that are dual purpose and kind of combined. There is no elevator. It is a two-story facility. A lot of the second story spaces do not, basically all of them don't meet accessibility. So similar situation when you kind of consider the things that we talked about at the fire station. Any addition or significant, not even significant, any upgrades are going to kind of require all the systems to be upgraded. The entire existing building to be brought into code, which it really probably can't do. On top of that, from a site standpoint, small lot, it resides at the kind of the base of that existing hill. So topographically speaking, there's not a lot of space to expand immediately from that lot. And then it has same MEPFP concerns. A lot of the fixtures have kind of, they're not unusable, but they're poor and kind of have gone through their lifespan at this point. So in looking at those two facilities, they're operable. There's nothing that's significant immediate damage or concern structurally for the building to fall down. We're not contending that it can't be used, but in terms of serving the community, our analysis is that there currently not much to do with them to move forward. There are two other sites that we looked at. There wasn't anything from a architectural or systems or structural standpoint to review, but we did take a look at the beginning of the project, what we call kind of the rectory lot. So this lot did have some pros to it, dual access. There's 2 street accesses to it, relatively open, not the greatest sight lines from a development standpoint. We didn't really consider it, but if you were to develop on there, you'd have to take some existing buildings down. And on top of that, the property isn't owned by the town. Additionally, we looked at the lot in front of the country club. This, when we did, we can get into it when we look at the site analysis. It's a great lot. It's a relatively flat area. It's out of the floodplain, dual access, a lot of space, but once again, not town owned. So didn't really get considered moving forward. So that was the existing conditions analysis. What we'll have as part of the final report is appendices that will basically be all of our consultants' review of all these existing conditions. So we can get into more detail when that gets handed out at the end of the project. Any questions or concerns on the existing conditions portion of the review?
If I can just mention, as far as an imminent need, the fire department is partially operating out of a tent that was put up, I believe in 2019. It has the exterior sort of skin of it has a 10-year lifespan, and we're 7 years into that now. So that could become costly within a few years. It is definitely showing its age. It's getting pretty rough. It has no insulation, so all winter long the heat is just running constantly. Aside from that, both buildings are really operationally, just not functional any longer. We've been in our current fire station for 74 years this year. The building is older than that. It was built as a temporary structure by the U.S. Army. Their building is over 100 years old, even more than that, 130, something like that. So although this is going to be sort of an overwhelming view of things for a lot of people, especially when we get to cost, we really do need to move this forward, I think.
Our team wasn't tasked necessarily to look at the operational side of things. That's more for the chiefs to present, but based on our experience doing this before, there are some significant considerations about how they do operate in those facilities according to standards and best practices for both departments, NFPA and CALIA, and other sort of state standards for operations for these departments. And it's worth noting that they are making do the best they can, but it is definitely not, and it's probably no surprise to anybody that's been paying attention to this issue. It's definitely not what they should have and what is expected, and certainly going forward continues, like Chief mentioned, there'll be continued issues as the town repeatedly faces new challenges to bring things up to where they need to be. And I guess from our standpoint, the facilities won't be any help to you now. Like they're just going to constantly be that impediment in the way of things. So it's an opportune time to look at things and start planning for that future condition.
Thank you for that, Chief. Concurrently, while we're looking at the existing conditions, we set aside time to meet with each chief and kind of walk through the space needs. If they were to kind of plan their future stations, what would those look like? So we sat down, we presented to both departments what, from our experience, for spaces that modern departments are requiring as you develop future facilities. They also provide their own feedback. There's a lot of talk about water service when it comes to both departments. So what we're presenting here is a kind of a high level review from the space needs from the police standpoint. So before we get into space needs, we talk about staffing. We look at the existing staffing. So we've got a kind of highlight of the current day shift officers. You see that's a total of 9, and then total staff being at 25. We then ask both departments to kind of look into the future. If you were to kind of plan ahead from now, what is future Nahant requiring in terms of public safety needs? So that's what the future column is kind of looking at. We got day shift officers shifting from 9 to 10. So there's not much change in terms of what the department size is. Total staff goes from 25 to 28. So once again, we're not necessarily contending that the department's growing. It's simply that the facilities that they're inhabiting don't meet their current needs. We then look at the exterior requirements. While touring the space, Chief Furlong showed me the garage where the current motorcycle is in. It's basically call it an exterior closet. It's not quite a garage. And so you can see here with the existing
So that's the final select board member.
with the current parking, you've got the garage at 1, which is that motorcycle. Outside, you've got 29. That kind of satisfies some shift change and the department needs currently. If you're looking at the future, what we've identified is, that grows significantly in terms of what the department's going to look at and need to kind of house and protect some of these vehicles that are servicing the town. So it goes from 1 to 10, and then outside future 66. That 66 number also accounts for the fact that we've got what we're showing here is a proposed meeting space. So it looks at not only public parking, but potential overflow parking for training or various meetings that the town may need. So we're not saying on a day-to-day basis that the facility and department needs 66 spaces, but in terms of the space needs and requirements of what the town department's looking for, that's what that is. Current space needs in terms of square footage, pretty low. What we did was we went to that space needs document. It's pretty extensive. As I mentioned, we're basically highlighting one of the larger rooms in that space needs document. And then what we're projecting into the future is the first and second floor requirements. You could put it all into one floor, so you could just have a 13,000 square foot facility, but we figured we'd take advantage of the footprint. There isn't a lot of space in town to develop, also considering that existing footprint of the police station being a quite small area. So we considered, because it currently operates at a 2-floor facility, that we would also propose a future 2-floor facility. So this is the space needs for the police. Navigate the mouse.
Allison got it to work. Try.
I did. Do you want me
Yeah.
to?
Just- oh.
There you go.
Almost.
So,
Alrighty, here we are.
there we go.
So moving on to the fire department, kind of a similar exercise here, high level review of that space needs exercise. We've got the current day shift firefighter staffing at 4, current total staff at 27, future day shift firefighter 6. So once again, we're not contesting that the department's growing enormously. It's just what looks like, serving in the future. And total future staff 46.
And just to be clear, when we say daytime, it's not necessarily excluding the fact that people are going to be working 24-hour shifts. That's just during the daytime.
Which has the most individuals in the building at once. Parking, obviously quite significant for our fire department. Current garage is 7. Current exterior parking at 10. And you can see at the future garage being 11 and future outside parking at 59. Kind of a similar situation in which we have training room and the idea that this facility could welcome the public for various uses. Moving on to the space needs, looking at the existing square footage and then projecting out to the future space needs. We did a similar exercise here. The current fire station doesn't operate as a 2-floor facility, but we tried to look at some spaces that could go on a second floor to kind of alleviate some of that expanse with a singular story footprint. So that grows to a 23,000 square foot department. Jeff, you want to talk about where that kind of resides in terms of standard size for?
Sure. So, for a headquarters facility, particularly one that, has to deal with a lot of different types of emergencies like this, it's not surprising to see square footages for a headquarters building being anywhere in the 19 to 25,000 square foot range. So from a program perspective, being in and around 23,000 seems like a pretty good, pretty fair comparison. I will say, as part of a study process, we're doing this analysis recommending what the ideal scenario would be. And then once the town decides how to move forward, the actual design process that will happen later on will refine that. And it may, and likely usually does, get designed more efficiently than the original program suggests. And I'll point out one minor sort of component of this is what's called a grossing factor. And that when we do this analysis, we find out what the net square footage is. In other words, every office or meeting room, bathroom, that sort of thing has a net square footage. That doesn't include walls and corridors and stairs and ducts and also the mechanicals that go into the building. And so when you have to design a building, you have to put all that stuff into it. So we assign a grossing factor. Because we don't have a design yet, we assume a certain percentage. In this case, it's a guess. And so once you get into design, that becomes a real thing because those things actually exist in that design. And usually we're able to design it more efficiently than the study projects. But to give you our best guess as to what the facility would be, we have to project a number at this stage. So while I think it's starting out at 23,000 for police, and I forget what it was, 16 or something for fire, or sorry, 23 for fire and something like 16 for police, we likely expect that those would go down in a future design phase and be designed more efficiently.
I'll just make a quick comment on the size or the growth from the current building to what's proposed. Until about 25 years ago, the fire department did not operate an ambulance or an ocean rescue team. So we've had to bring in a lot more apparatus, that did not exist in the fire department in years past, certainly when the building was first occupied by the department. So we have a lot more apparatus now. The apparatus has grown substantially in size over the past 70 years. So that accounts for a lot of the growth.
I'd say the apparatus from itself takes up a large chunk of that square footage that we're talking about. Everything else is fairly small in comparison. And that's that jump from existing to what we'll call space needs analysis square footage or proposed square footage of doubling, tripling, sometimes more is fairly typical for departments that haven't had any additions or anything really touching them for decades. Go to some towns, it's 100 years before they get around to doing something at the fire station. It's very common to see a threefold increase in the square footage requirements for the exact reasons you mentioned, which is the mission is totally different than what it was originally designed for. And so you've now got to accommodate all of that, which mostly means storage for vehicles, equipment, and then there's the personnel that adds to it. So that's a majority of what leads to this growth.
On the current total square footage, does that number include the temporary tent building? Is that's inclusive of that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We're also highlighting obviously the largest space in that Jeff talked about. In addition to just kind of showing the size of it and the bays, we're worked with the fire department chief Antrim to identify all the apparatus that goes in there and position them per an ideal deployment. So we're kind of considering all variables when it comes to laying out these proposed spaces for the needs of the town.
Right. And some people might note, hey, there's extra space in the back of that bay. Why don't you make it a little shorter? The design is intended to be slightly larger and to give the department flexibility when they cycle out apparatus, get a new apparatus in the future that might be longer than what they currently have, or they might need a different type of piece that is configured differently. And so we don't want to build a new building and leave them short for the next however many years it ends up being, at least 30.
That would happen in our current facility. Within 10 years, they replace the apparatus and it would barely fit.
It's a tight walk around that apparatus. Questions about the space needs in general for both departments? Great. Moving on, the next task that we jumped into is site selection. So we basically have an existing conditions analysis of some sites in town. We have the general size of what we're, being proposed for both police and fire. We worked with the town and we're checking in constantly. One of the things that we talked about was this may not be the 4 sites we talked about at the beginning actually kind of evolved a little bit. We ended up considering some other spaces. So you're going to see a pivot here at some point. There's a space between the existing elementary school and the DPW that was considered, as well as the existing town-owned land behind the police department. So those kind of 2 spaces come into the fold here as town-owned land that we felt like were worth looking at and considering as part of site selection. So as mentioned, with that, we looked at kind of some test fits with the town. So we looked at basically taking that existing lot for where the fire station is, and how would you propose fitting the new building in it? There is a 2nd-story space, but as you can see, it more than fills it. It's worth noting that this layout has a few considerations. One of them is that in order to have a dual access apparatus bay, we had to kind of get a little bit creative with how we get to the back of that station, because you can't quite fit access between the existing DPW facility and the new proposed fire station. So we've actually got kind of access around the DPW facility to get back out to Flash Road. On top of that, this layout assumes rezoning the area. Basically, a portion, as we mentioned, of the existing fire station exists within that natural resources district. We're talking about a bigger facility. We're basically going to have to reclaim some of that area in order to consider this as a future site for the fire department. As mentioned, we looked at this lot between elementary and DPW. And this is taking this a similar layout for the fire station. It's actually mirrored. We developed a different site layout. And so this is moving that proposed fire station out of that floodplain area, out of the existing area. It also allows for when you're developing and building the new fire station, if this is what the town decides in the future, the department can stay in that existing area and then fully move in one move. Whereas if you stay or you redevelop that existing area, you have to knock down the building, the department has to move out to a temporary facility, reside in a temporary facility for presumably, a 1.5 to 2 years before then moving back in. So that's another cost when considering, and it's something that we're gonna look at the next meeting is these 2 buildings, although the same layout flipped, have various variables that we have to consider when it comes to cost and how the town works with developing each lot in each proposed solution. The next space that we looked at was we talked about the land behind the existing police station is town owned. There is some topography to consider in this particular area, but we're proposing putting that new police station kind of at the top of that area. It's out of the floodplain, relatively good line of sight. It's in the same general area, but you really can't fit that new proposed police station in at the existing lot, so you have to get creative. Something worth noting is that this layout also considers a pretty significant move. There's an existing radio tower It's actually co-located with a cell tower in the area. When it was noted that it was also co-locating with a cell tower, there's basically no reasonable way of putting a police station up against that existing facility. There's like the shed there. So what we're proposing is if we were to consider the site, you'd have to kind of move that cell tower for the police station, or yeah, for the police station to go in this particular location. And then finally, the town was interested in basically combining the two programs into a public safety building. So it's not that we're combining the square footages, there's some economy that you could kind of combine some of those spaces. So you see that when we get to the concept designs. But really the only lot that could really accommodate a facility of this size is the lot between DPW and the elementary school. Any questions about the kind of test fits that we did after moving from space needs into kind of that site selection? So basically what we had identified was these are the 4 sites that we would be looking at putting a concept design into.
And they look pretty clunky. We're just drawing boxes on there. And the
Yeah.
idea behind that is simply just to confirm that the sites are big enough to hold the program. So that we knocked out any sites that weren't big enough. And as Sean said, there were some initial obstacles that any design work would have to overcome. So when you see the next stage, you can see how we're starting to think about how they might be overcome.
In addition to that, those test fits, we developed this site selection matrix. So this considers all 8 sites that we looked at. We've got the existing 67 Flash Road fire station site. We've got the DPW, kind of, we're calling it the DPW extension site, where we're proposing the public safety building and the fire station. So those are the first 2 columns. We then have the existing police station site, the tight site that the existing police station is at. There's then kind of 2 sites behind that existing police station. We're calling it Greystone Road and the existing police station extended. So those 2 lots. We also then have the rectory and the country club. So those make up the 8 columns. To the left there, what we've identified as issues and applied a value to each one of those items. So starting at the top, we got 3 items that have a value of 10. That's lot size / program fit. We then have floodplain considerations. We then have buildability, considering topography, soil, cost. The building cost is a 9. Acquisition cost being a 9. Then moving on down. Community impact, stormwater management, vehicular access, response time, visibility, traffic conflicts, communications, zoning, and utilities. So all those issues, we call them, were applied a value. We then graded each site based on each one of those parameters. And at the bottom, kind of tallied up a total.
It should be noted that we did the assessment of the issues and the weighting of those issues before we actually explored any of the sites. So the intention was to determine what the town held as the highest priority down to the least, so that we can objectively score the sites. And normally, actually, response time on these charts when we do them is normally higher. But because it's such a small unity here, it actually doesn't need as much weighting, because you can pretty much get everywhere you need to get to within that recommended time. So we highlighted the ones that sort of were the rising to the top. This chart is not intended to be the be all and end all and tell the town exactly what to do. It's to recommend where you should put your focus.
Any questions about the test fits or sites selection matrix?
Just on the stormwater management, I see the police station current site 3 and site 4 rated as 4. Could you explain that a little bit? And actually 5. It's that whole area. I think the Greystone Road.
Due to the topography of the site, it's assumed that there's bedrock that we would have. And so the idea that that rock is basically in the way of decent management when it comes to stormwater.
Got it.
So we're not contending that it can't be solved, but just in a kind of vacuum, if you were to kind of consider site items, soils, etc., that's what that factored in.
Okay, thank you.
It is a little kind of like, you don't assume that that would be.
Well, I was just thinking it's up on a hill. It's gonna
Go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's going.
Straight down.
Managing that, yeah, is a concern, right?
Right.
So then finally, we basically took all those items. We've got the existing conditions analysis, the space needs, taking that space needs, applying it towards ultimately the sites that we agreed that we would develop with the test fits. And then we proceeded with the concept design. So what you're gonna see is some site concept designs as well as building concept designs. They aren't necessarily wed perfectly in the sense that you can kind of get an understanding between the two, but the footprints of the architectural layouts, which are basically bubble diagrams, what we did is we took that space needs, arranged it with adjacencies, made sure all the spaces that need to be near each other at the front of the building, public access, mechanical areas towards the rear, the apparatus bay, not having anything get in the way of having access to that. Decontamination sequence needs to be considered. And we basically applied an idea of how to circulate through the building. We added, we've got elevators, we've got stairs, etc. We took that footprint, we provided that to our civil engineer. Our civil engineer took that footprint, same scale, and applied it towards the site. And that considered vehicular access, parking, and some of the items that we talked about with civil considerations. So what we're looking at here is the concept design for the site for the fire station. It is bigger. One of the things I forgot to mention at the beginning, when we analyzed that existing building, the fire station isn't really off of Flash Road per our recommended standards in order to kind of do a turnaround in front of the building. So that building, in addition to going into the resources district already, we're pushing it back again to get that kind of standard 60 feet off of the road, which is something that we apply to most of our schematic design and concept layouts. Now, Jeff can tell you that in his experience, not every community decides to keep it around 60. Some, I think Boxborough, I talked to with other PMs today, wants to go beyond 60 to 80.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good practice to have it, but many communities can't. I mean, you try to put a station in Boston or Cambridge, so you're not going to get 60 feet off the street. So it's really just a matter of what can fit and what's operationally the department can live with. If you're trying to turn vehicles around in the street, blocking traffic, or there might be other issues there. So ideally, you'd like to bring them off the street to turn them around, back them into the station. If you can get that space. If there's other site considerations, then you got to have to back them up on the street.
The people on Zoom can't necessarily see what I'm about to do, but I'm just going to explain some of the layouts here. So we have the building footprint here. We've got that dual access by kind of going around the DPW facility. There is that public parking in the front, kind of separating those uses. We want to make sure that the department itself doesn't get impeded by people visiting the headquarters facility. And then we made sure to come up against the existing recreation areas in the back and not take anything away from them. I don't think we have any concerns. I think there's some parking there, but I wanted to make sure that we were mindful of keeping as much as we could of those, so we don't get in the way of any kind of community recreation. But we do have to, you can see the natural resources area that we're using grows, and the building also kind of has to grow in this direction off of the street. So I think there are some recreation areas, whether it be picnic tables, if you will, in between the DPW facility and the proposed fire station. We worked with the fire department. They're very proactive about training. So we want to make sure that the future station has the ability to have props, and that's the space in that particular area. So that's also getting in the way of kind of squeezing another access road, if you will, between the two facilities, because we want to make sure we're providing what the fire department needs in terms of maintaining its training, learning, etc.
And that location is far enough over to avoid the floodplain issues where it's presently sitting?
Nope, so
It's still there.
yeah,
Okay.
this, if we're putting the, yeah, you can see it right here, the floodplain is identified with this line right here.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
basically the entire lot is
Yeah.
in the floodplain.
Yeah. Okay.
And we looked at with our civil engineer, what grade is, if you consider the street being zero. You know, there's only so much slope you can add to that apron before you raise it too high, and so you really can't get out of that floodplain at this particular area. And I know the department doesn't experience any flooding now, it's just worth considering for the future.
Sorry. Trying to point out the. Gotta go slowly, they're like slow, deliberate.
So then what we're showing here is the concept design for the fire station at 67 Black Road.
Can you do that by not? They can't see you if you do.
No, I know, I'm just
You can't point at anything.
for them people in here, no, not worth it.
At least one select board people. Zoom, so.
So some of the spaces are color coded. We have the apparatus bay is red, some of the apparatus support spaces are red. Flanking on the left side of the floor plan are all those dedicated apparatus spaces, so you've got storage, I believe there's EMS storage. And
Yeah, SCBA, fill and repair, workroom, training storage.
we're also considering kind of a training stair, training tower, and a mezzanine area for storage and flexibility, etc.
One of the things I just want to interject on the training side, particularly on both fire and police, is to try to integrate it into the building as much as possible, because sending them somewhere else to train is a big expense and a big, frankly, hassle to get them out of town, because then you have to backfill those positions while they're training. So we're building a new facility. We want to take advantage of what we're already needing to just build the training element right into the station so they can train right here in town.
So at the front of the building is kind of positioned just the way the site plan is. So the kind of lighter areas at the beginning are the public areas, you get the vestibule, the lobby, the training areas. Admin is kind of on the first floor, a little bit lower off of the main corridor. As I mentioned, in between the apparatus bay and some of those admin spaces, that's the decontamination sequence to kind of separate some of the hot and cold areas so that everyone can kind of come back, get cleaned, and go back into the clean spaces of the building. On the second floor, that's where we got the dorm rooms, some fitness areas, the day room, the kitchen area, and some service, laundry areas. This mouse is a
I'll get
story of
there,
its own.
get there. Get there.
Yeah. So then the next proposed layout for the fire station is that Johnson Elementary Field between DPW area. So similar layout, we flipped the entire layout, new site layout, different kind of public from fire separation. Still keeping the dual access bay. It's off the street 60 feet as well, but it's kind of a different look. It's worth noting, it does kind of eat into, as you can see, a lot of that area that's currently being used by the school, which is obviously probably not ideal, but it is one of the bigger town-owned areas to kind of consider for you.
Yeah, I just note this is the only site that is town owned out of the flood zone that can accommodate a building that size.
Pause for mouse.
Was there discussion with DPW about
Yes.
eating up some of their space?
Yeah, I think that, if the town did choose to move forward, this path, we've had conversations with Zach, that salt shed that you see that's next to the DPW
Right.
building is falling down, so.
Yeah.
We think there would be an opportunity to shift everything closer to the DPW and shift their yard around.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You said the gas tank is not a big, fuel tanks and.
No, the fuel tank's only 250 gallons.
Relocate.
And it could be old anyway, so
Okay.
I don't think that would be a big obstacle.
So similar layout, just flipped and kind of reconsidered from a site standpoint. So those are the two proposed fire station options, both the existing current and then the DPW elementary school adjacent area. Moving on to police. So as mentioned before, this assumes relocating that existing radio tower.
It's just to also interject here, to orient folks, we've turned this 90 degrees. So if you're familiar with the other diagrams we were showing, this is now sideways from that. So north is kind of up to the right diagonally. And the existing station's on the left-hand side of the image.
So in this layout, we've got a 2-story building, rectangular at the top of that, basically hill, if you will. It kind of exists a little bit, basically on top of that existing radio tower. We're proposing the radio tower to be moved to the rear of the site. The idea was that we would provide public parking, police access to the sally ports. We'll see those when we look at the architectural layout. And then the radio tower would be kind of put just beyond the requirements for this police facility to move into this area. At the existing facility, we're proposing to, see if you're kind of thinking of it sequence wise, the police department would stay there, you build a new building, they move out of it. We then propose removing that existing building and making use of that area as kind of overflow parking, as we mentioned, for any kind of communications or training or what have you, to serve the public in the department itself. So that's what's happening with that existing lot, which is kind of below there as overflow parking. Moving on to the architectural layout, pretty tight layout. On the right side of the first floor, where we have the sally port, the patrol garage. So that's the access that the police department would, that's their sequencing into the station itself. On the left side of that first floor plan, you've got a public entrance, if you will, a vestibule, the lobby, the training room on the first floor. That dispatch room kind of overlooks and kind of connects the two public and private areas to kind of keep security. And then moving up to the second floor, you've got a lot of kind of the admin, police chief, lieutenant, workroom, conference room. You've got a lot of the larger kind of they don't need to be on the first floor areas. So you've got the men's and women's locker room, the fitness room, and some of the mechanical spaces and electrical, mechanical, etc. That's police. And then finally, moving on to considering a public safety facility for the community. So as noted before, the only space really that's town owned that can accommodate a building of this size is this area. It is larger than the fire station. It does need a little bit more consideration when considering public parking, kind of separation between the fire station apparatus, the police apparatus, the police parking, the fire parking. So there's a lot to consider when going into this particular layout. It does basically take the entirety of that area. This is just concept. We do have that dual access, and we are still allowing some kind of training areas between that drive aisle between DPW and the public safety building. Fire station. Fire department. So you can kind of tell we basically took that proposed fire sequencing in terms of the apparatus support spaces, the decontamination sequence, and then we've kind of added in some extra circulation to get to kind of separation of the police areas, fire areas, admin areas, public areas, etc. And then on the second floor, that's where we've got the dorm rooms, a singular fitness room, singular men's room, the document, day room, the kitchen. We do have another stair in there to kind of accommodate potential security and separation of the two departments, to still meet that egress requirements for a facility of this size. So if you're noticing another stair, that's why. And we still have on the other side adjacent, beyond the apparatus space, the kind of mezzanine and training areas.
Generally speaking, we would always try to provide any report or any study with options. So even if the town wasn't thinking of a public safety building, it's a good thing just to see the pros and cons when considering it. Obviously, it's bigger facility, so a lot more money up front. But over time, probably less than building two separate facilities, as well as the fact that Sean alluded to, there's usually about a 10% savings on program costs because you're combining a bunch of stuff. You only need one mechanical room, you only need one gym, you only need one community or training space. And because of the consolidation in one facility, it's more efficiently laid out. So even though it does present a larger upfront cost typically, and it's a bigger building for the town, so aesthetically it looks maybe place. It does have a lot of advantages to it work. Some of the challenges around a public safety building, besides money and appearance, can sometimes be down to how the departments work together. Because if you've never been co-located together, sometimes that can be a challenge for the departments to figure out how to culturally exist together in the same facility. But in talking to the departments, we felt like we got positive responses on that aspect, and thought it would be a good thing for the town to consider, just generally speaking. So that's the end of it, right? That's towards the end of what we wanted to talk about in terms of the materials that we went through. As Sean said, there will be a final report, and ultimately, costs will be part of that, and we'll have another discussion with you folks when the report's ready and the costs are in there, and we can go through all of those items. But we did want to make sure there was time to discuss now if there's any reaction to what you've seen so far, that there's, missing pieces, or have you considered this and not the other thing? And any questions about what we've got in front of us, or just general discussion of what you think of the various options?
I have a question for Chief Furlong. Regarding the High Street extension option. Access from there onto Nahant Road has always struck me as being a little delicate. Because obviously looking towards the east,
Yep.
you don't get a very good view.
Right.
Any thoughts on that? Any feelings about that?
It would be less of a concern for us than it would be for the fire apparatus. And I understand your concern, it is a sharp turn there, but
If you guys are in a hurry, as far as getting, you're at the station, you're being dispatched, you're in a hurry, you gotta
Yep.
get someplace. Getting from High Street Extension onto Nahant Road.
it would take some getting used to. Put it that way.
And how about the visibility for the public? I mean, you're kind of hidden away out of the corner. How would you feel about that?
I think with the extension of the current lot, I think we can keep probably the signage, the
Okay.
memorial down
Oh,
there.
that's a good thought.
Yeah, I would imagine
Yes.
signage would still be on the
Yeah,
front.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, some of the flags, maybe, I don't know, but, yeah, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Austin gets a fire pole.
Yeah. It will be fun.
And there's enough space, Austin, as far as, your current situation, your plans for expansion, things as long as there's enough space as far as, sleeping accommodations and that.
Yeah, I think in the space analysis, needs analysis that they've worked with us on, we did account for that, having enough dorm facilities for potential future staffing increases and and female.
That was my next question.
Yeah, we currently do not have any separate facilities in our current building, so that will be accounted for in the new building. There is a little additional space in the apparatus bay. You'll see there it shows 2 ambulances. We currently only operate 1 ambulance. I think in the future, there's definitely a good opportunity for the town to license and operate a second ambulance. It would help us with our staffing. I think it would generate more revenue for the town, offering it as a mutual aid ambulance to our neighbors.
Okay, so I was going.
Yeah.
Need a little more on that one.
Yeah, and it would serve as a backup ambulance for us. We're having more and more frequency of simultaneous calls. 2024, I think there were 44 incidences with multiple emergency calls at the same time, usually medical aids. In 2025, the number increased to 63, I think it was, and we've already had a number of them this year. So
If we got to that step, and this is probably a little off topic, but would we still rely on a private ambulance for ALS?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think our call volume it will likely not ever really justify us switching over to ALS service.
Okay.
Just to piggyback on what Austin was saying, the the station was the concept designs as well as the program was all planned with that growth in mind, and some of the concepts that and facts really that both departments are dealing with of how to plan for the future, be a little bit more self-reliant here, just in case you can't get that mutual aid. And so some folks, residents, others that might be looking at these plans and going, why is there so many dorm rooms? Why is there so many apparatus? We don't have that. And that's one thing that everybody should consider when looking at it, is that the drawings you're seeing already incorporate that today. Now, you may not have that ambulance day one, but if the space is there ready for it when you need it in the future.
And we would have, and that's a good point. You're going to be all staff at some point. Are you getting away from call firefighters entirely with your current plan?
We hope to not have to get away from utilizing part-time firefighters, but that's been an ongoing discussion with the finance committee through this budget process. We do have a need now for more full-time staffing, and the part-time staffing system that we use and have been using for over 100 years is not functional anymore. It's failing. And I don't want to get too in-depth here on that, but
I guess my question is pointed more towards resources for storm coverage when you're bringing in everybody.
yes, yeah, we have those discussions. So even if the bunk rooms can't accommodate everybody during a storm, we do have that training room, and we can have partitions in there, so sort of create little sleeping cubicles.
It's a good point, because every dorm room has been designed to be able to hold one individual during regular time, and then in a storm emergency to hold two, to have two, roll out or fold out cot for a second person. So you can double the capacity on any average storm just within the dorms. And then, as the chief was saying, there's the training room and other spots in the station that you can then have additional capacity if you want to bring 100% into the building.
Okay, good.
And you noted utility companies also taking, I believe, from what I recall, people sleeping in a car, because utility companies have prepared by coming here for a potential storm, and this would accommodate those individuals potentially as well. So that training room is designed with the intention of being flexible. It's hard to make architecture flexible, but with carefully considered storage spaces and making sure we accommodate various furniture layouts, you can basically take advantage of a larger room to accommodate various uses.
Okay. Good.
I just want to note that a lot of work has gone into this from both chiefs. They've attended far more meetings with the architects than I have. A lot of thought has gone into this, a lot of planning. I do see both facilities as in dire need of new space. I had never fully toured both facilities until this process came about. And I think I did with Sean. So I'm a big supporter of this project going forward.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be a great deal of concern as far as cost and such as that. And I'll just put in my 2 cents on it is that we need a place to start from. We need a platform. We need to know what we want, and we'll build how much it's going to cost, and then hopefully sometime within my lifetime anyway, we'll be able to get this moving forward. I'm glad that the time has been put in here. It's so long overdue. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, you talk about making do, and that's exactly what we've been doing is making do. And I think that the town has been very fortunate that this hasn't hurt possibly one of our first responders or something along that in making do. We don't have the resources, and that's where people get hurt. So I'm glad we're making this effort.
Yeah, no, this is a great step forward and really helps to us all. We've been talking about it for a long time, and now we have something to talk about.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
I did just want to note for the viewers and the Nahant residents that we were hoping to have a warrant article at this upcoming annual town meeting to fund the next stage of design, schematic design. But because the timeline became too tight, this is not going to be on the annual town meeting. We're going to spend some more time sort of with public outreach and sort of really digesting the final report when it's finished, and hopefully as a town decide what the best path forward is.
Excellent.
So it does still appear as an article on the town meeting warrant. However, we're recommending to indefinitely postpone it to be taken up at a later time, once again, like the chief said, all of this is digested and we see the final report.
So we've still got a long way to go.
Hopefully not too long.
Yeah.
Want to try the fire pole?
I don't know, if Jean had any questions?
Oh, Gene, Gene, if you have any questions, you unmute your mic. Good. Okay.
Do we have
Do you want public?
citizen comment?
We could take some public comments before we adjourn.
You could have run the show.
I'll
Question.
deal with the notes. Oh, gosh.
Do you need to sit over there because it needs a proximity?
I don't think so. What before?
I don't see any hands.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was a hand or just a hand over the camera.
Yeah. I think,
Hey, Robbie,
yes, Gene.
I got lost there in the ozone. What I was saying is that as we've gone through this and I've thought about it, obviously, I think you know that my support is fully behind the project. And I think that the more we rely on both chiefs' judgment, the greater this project will turn out, because they live it every day. They know exactly what their needs are and how this should be responded to. So hopefully the town will look at it the same way.
That's well said, Gene. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
You're welcome.
House is in shock from the size of the building.
I don't see any other hands up for questions, so I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And no debate, roll call vote.
Pat O'Reilly, aye.
Gene Canty, aye.
Up to go aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time
Thank you
tonight.
very
much.
Dragging you all in person, all the technical stuff.
No, it's good to.
And I think there was better to sometimes kind of have these first ones, you can see.
Yes.
Look them in the eye and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer to see this guy in person.